Hey, Matthew, you're an all star. On today's edition of the show, we are going to be discussing Matthew Tkachuk being named the Florida Panthers representative for the 2023 All Star game in Sunrise, Florida. And we're going to ask a very important question after the World Juniors has been completed. What if the Florida Panthers pick that was sent to the Montreal Canadiens ends up number one overall? And we're going to preview tonight's game between the Florida Panthers and the Detroit Red Wings from Little Caesars Arena, all on today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome into this Friday, January 6th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're to your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden. And if you want your World Juniors recap, make sure to listen to Heidi Halakash at Locked On NHL Prospects. And don't forget to submit your screenshot of your subscription to the Locked On Florida Panthers YouTube channel and your 5-star rating on whichever app you listen to Locked On Panthers, and send it over on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. And if you don't have Twitter, you could send it at LockedOnFLAPanthers at gmail.com. Winner will be announced on Monday. So good luck, everybody. So yesterday during the intermission of Columbus versus Washington, the All-Stars, at least the first representative for each NHL team, has been announced. Of course, we've been anticipating this for a while now, even before COVID, because let's not forget that the Florida Panthers were supposed to host the 2021 NHL All-Star game in Sunrise, Florida, of course, rescheduled due to the 56-game season, and then Vegas getting it last season in a normal season again. And now the Florida Panthers and the city of Sunrise, Florida, and Broward County is going to get the All-Star game back in Sunrise. And Matthew Tkachuk, 47 points in 36 games. Of course, we just witnessed him with a 4-point game the other night against the Arizona Coyotes, and is first as a Panther, and just incredible individual performance that he's put on all season. Well deserving of being the representative for the Florida Panthers, and to nobody's surprise, honestly. Actually, because I'm recording this later in the afternoon with with the morning skate already happening, which was only backup goaltenders, and the backup goaltender and the scratches really skating earlier today at Little Caesars Arena. We actually had Jameson Olive ask Matthew Tkachuk how he felt about his All-Star nod and playing alongside Brady Tkachuk in the All-Star game coming up in Sunrise, Florida. He says, quote, "Very, very excited. I think my sister probably the most excited. She's going to try and sneak out of school and come for the weekend festivities," close quote. And he also you also we also have an opportunity to vote for the next representative for the Florida Panthers for the All-Star game. Last year, the Vegas Golden Knights had 3 representatives in the All-Star game: Mark Stone, Alex Pietrangelo, and former Panther Jonathan Marchessault. And there's an opportunity with the Florida Panthers hosting it that they'll get a chance to have more than one representative. And if you're thinking about who's deserving versus who's marketable for the Panthers, if you're talking about who's deserving as far as playing games and production, I would say Carver Hagee would be that guy. But as far as marketing and when an event is happening in your host city, I think it might end up being Sasha Barkov being that second representative for the Florida Panthers, even though he's missed a good amount of the season for the Cats. But of course, we know what the captain can do when he's healthy and going. And this is usually the part of the season where Sasha Barkov mostly explodes. He mostly does if you look at just his track record. Really ever since he's come into the league. But we do have a few news on what's going to be going on in the All-Star game, in All-Star festivities over the weekend, which dates, if you need a reminder, February 3rd and 4th, Friday and Saturday in Sunrise, Florida. And Steve Mayer joined 32 Thoughts podcast last week when they were at Fenway Park during the Winter Classic and spoke about how there's going to be a dunk tank at the All-Star Game festivities. There's going to be some festivities around the beach as well in Fort Lauderdale, and might involve an animal or two. They didn't say which ones, but you can kind of take a guess that it's going to involve probably a gator there. I doubt they'll include a Florida panther due to the fact that it's an endangered species as well. So I'd be highly concerned if they decide to use the animal that represents the hockey team, because of course, excuse me, even if you grew up in South Florida, especially in school, you learned all about the Florida panther as an endangered species, and I would hate for the NHL to use it as an animal for the All Star Game festivities, knowing that we need to continuously protect this species. And there's going to be an accuracy shooting contest along with the dunk tank, and it involved getting wet. And of course, what's Florida known for? It's known for golf, which get has me personally excited as someone who spent 8 years working in golf media. It's a little exciting seeing both of the things that I have been involved with media wise being combined in the NHL of All Star festivities. So it's probably gonna be a mix of hockey and golf, and I doubt it's gonna be in Jack's Place in Palm Beach Gardens where the Honda Classic is hosted, but there's gonna be something in relation to the hockey and golf combined. So but I would one thing I would love to see, and this is something that 32 Thoughts also brought up as well, is I hope Adam Sandler makes an appearance. Of course, if you watch Happy Gilmore, you know that there is a mix of hockey and golf. Um, the story of Happy Gilmore not being good enough in hockey, wanting to make a career of being a hockey player, and then he finds a calling of being a golfer, a really great golfer, and and I hope there's something related to a ninth hole, saying that there is a meeting at the ninth hole to meet up there and be all dressed up for that occasion. So I think that will be a little funny to try to mix it in hockey, golf, Adam Sandler, you name it, and just put all that together in relation to that. But going back to the NHL All Star Game and the voting in relation to it. There's two more spots in the Atlantic Division for to add the Panthers player, two skaters and one goalie. Of course, we're not expecting a goalie to be a part of the festivities, but you could have a Twitter vote that would last for from 12:01 a.m. to uh, from January 12th to January 14th, 11:59 p.m. Eastern time, with the hashtag NHL All Star Vote. And I already set a timer, a scheduled tweet for my vote to on both my personal account and the Locked On Florida Panthers Twitter page to put my vote in. So that is already out of the way. And you can vote 10 times on nhl.com/vote to put whoever you want to vote in for the All-Star game. I believe you have 10 entries a day, I believe. And once a day, I'd have to go back and double check on that one, but you're able to do that on that site as well, as far as trying to get a Carter Verhaeghe or Sasha Barkov into the All-Star game, as our region is hosting the festivities, and it's really exciting. Even though the players aren't really too enthusiastic about the All-Star game, not a lot of people are. John Tortorella, head coach of the Philadelphia Flyers, said he doesn't give a crap, uh, filtering the language there of what he actually said. But yeah, it's excited for that it's in our region, and that is what has me excited. I mean, you see me, I'm wearing the All-Star festivities shirt, if you're watching this on the YouTube channel. So I'm pretty excited about it being here. If it wasn't in Sunrise, Florida, it's just a normal All-Star game for me, and I'm sure a lot of you feel that way as well. But in segment number 2, we're going to ask a very important question now that the World Juniors has been wrapped up and that the Florida Panthers don't own their 2023 first round pick. We're going to ask a question. What if their first round pick that was sent over to Montreal in the Ben Chiarot trade, what if that ends up being the pick that ends up being number 1 overall? We're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But first, we're going to tell you all about Built Bar. I know you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories, then you got to try Built Bar. We got just enough for the new year, and I know my goal is to eat a little healthier this year. If you're like me, you want to eat healthier but don't want to compromise taste, then man, I've got just the thing for you. You got to try Built. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. Seriously, they're delicious, and you won't think they're good for you. Perfect for your New Year's resolution. What makes Built Bar so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And they come in unbelievably flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. I'm not sure how Built does it, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is that they're healthy. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering your Built bars at built.com. Now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today. Walk to the pharmacy section. Grab yourself a box of Built bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. If you're close to a Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter and churro. You can thank me later. Back on this second segment here on this Friday, January 6th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. And the World Juniors just wrapped up. And congratulations to the players of Canada, not exactly the organization of Hockey Canada. Honestly, in my personal opinion, I think everything that they profit should be donated to victims of sexual assault due to everything that went on in the 2018 World Junior Championships, and the fact that Hockey Canada as a governing body is profiting off this is makes me a little uneasy. But congratulations to the players involved. And what a tournament, of course, for Connor Bedard, Shane Wright, as well, who Shane Wright has been sent back to the OHL, who's likely going to get traded from Kingston in order for a chance to play in the Memorial Cup. And just also the amount of the amount of draft eligible players that that had standout performances like a Leo Carson, Edouard Sale, Adam Fantilli as well for in the World Juniors as well. Of course, we can't mention the World Juniors without mentioning Ludvig Janssen, who was tied for 6th in points with 4 goals and 6 assists in 7 games. He scored goals of all kinds from one-timers from the left circle, on rushes, goes forehand, backhand in their quarterfinal game. Jakub Kaz, 5 points in 7 games. Sandis Velmanis, 2 points in 6 games as well. Marek Alscher didn't play, but Jakub Kaz and Marek Alscher did bring home the silver medal. Unfortunately, Ludvig Janssen did not bring home a medal as they lost to the USA in the in the bronze medal match. But this was also a great tournament for Coyotes, excuse me, Arizona Coyotes prospects like a Logan Cooley and a Dylan Gunter as well. So lots of other hockey franchises throughout the World Juniors really benefited from their performances, and you're seeing how the teams rebuilding are are looking at these players and just saying that their future is bright. And of course, not only three players who played for the Florida Panthers really in the World Juniors, but it I was watching mostly these at ease, knowing that there's really three players of focus uh, for this tournament. But also what a game between Czechia and Canada last night, and Dylan Gunter getting the overtime winner for Team Canada as well to bring the bring the gold medal home. Czechia having a chance to win their first gold medal in about 20 years. Radko Gudas was asked about the the Team Czechia being part of it, and he said he's really excited about it. And but also a lot of talk has been about GMs watching these World Juniors and hoping to aggressively sell at the trade deadline to increase their chances of getting the number one overall pick. But for the Panthers, they do not have their first round pick. Of course, it was traded in the Ben Chiarot trade last season, and that was heavily criticized last season for for that trade. And of course, I agree that if you were to do that again, you probably don't trade that much for a Ben Chiarot, or else you have another team trade for him. And it doesn't help as well that in the previous that first round pick that the Florida Panthers traded to Buffalo for Sam Reinhart, Yuri Kulich was just outstanding. 9 points in 7 games, 7 goals, 2 assists as well. But you still make that Sam Reinhart trade 9 times out of 10 because you're trying to build for now and trying to win now. And Yuri Kulich isn't going to be in the Buffalo lineup for a little while, even though he already has signed his ELC, already playing in Rochester for the Americans, and likely going to be being in the Buffalo roster sometime next year or even the year after. But as far as the Ben Chiarot trade, yeah, it doesn't look good right now. And what if that ends up being number one overall? Is I think it's more than just that trade. I think it's a matter of how you handle a buyout like Keith Yandel. And yeah, 2 seasons ago in the 2021 season, crazy to think that that was 2 years ago now. The whole players going up to management and saying, "We will not allow this to happen under our watch," about his Ironman streak being broken, which he doesn't even have the record now. It belongs to Phil Kessel of the Vegas Golden Knights now, who scored on his former team, the Pittsburgh Penguins, last night. But I think it's more than just that, because the Panthers are right now sinking, ninth worst points percentage in the NHL. 5% chance if the lottery were held today to be number one overall. About 4 points separate the Panthers pick to Montreal being a 5% chance versus a 2.5% chance. So still room to lower those chances for Montreal to get Connor Bedard from the floor with the Florida Panthers' pick. But it's failures with the Yandel buyout too. Instead of saying that they're gonna keep his streak alive, to scratch him and just say at the time, we don't care about your streak. We don't think you're good enough to be in the lineup. And that would have been forced the trade. Don't know what you get back for him. This was supposed to be his last year of the contract. This year, imagine Keith Yandel still being on this team after how poor he was in 2021, especially games one and two in the postseason, and having to be scratched in the 6 game series against the Tampa Bay Lightning. And it was unlike Coach Q at the time to give in to his players. And that cost the Panthers in the long term. And we're facing that right now as a team. But also, people think about how the Panthers with that pick, they could have had their pick. And it's in relation to the previous trade as well for Sam Reinhart as well, that if the Panthers, they kept their pick in the top 10, which was the year they won the President's Trophy, then that pick to Buffalo would have transferred to the next year. But that didn't happen. It's also about how Bill Zito discussed his conditions when doing those trades too. That's another thing. That first round pick would have been given up anyway. So because you were going to go after a Claude Giroux, I go after Claude Giroux again. And with being able to trade Yandel, maybe you re-sign a Mason Marchment or Claude Giroux. You could have had one of those two in your lineup, and you could have been in better position to be in a wild card spot as we speak. Yeah, they would have been cap strapped still in a way, but not to the point where you have the buyout money, and even with a healthy Patrick Hornquist, you can only have up to 20 players on your roster. Man, that buyout is looking really bad for the Panthers. I know it's short-term pain and it's gonna go away at least most of it this coming off season. But man, what the Panthers could have done differently there, as far as forcing a scratch and a trade, is what's hurting the Panthers more than just trading Ben Chiarot. That pick would have been gone anyway because you would have gone for it either way. No chance, no way in hell the Panthers were going to get Connor Bedard anyway. So it's a failure of discussing a trade and a force of a scratch, and how you discuss your protections, because it's an unprotected pick to Montreal, and it hurts. On Tuesday, the a few days after the Montreal Canadiens were in FLA Live Arena, there's still Habs fans the very next home game putting signs, hoping that the Panthers would continue to lose to improve their chances at that pick. Yeah, the Montreal Canadiens' record is worse than the Panthers, and they'll have a better chance with their own pick versus the Panthers. But man, this is increasing Montreal's chances right now of getting that pick via the Florida Panthers. And this is a topic that's constantly been talked about, even on national shows, and I hear all the time. This is the first time I'm addressing it. But man, it's a hard place to be if it ends up coming true. And it'll hurt. It'll hurt Bill Zito. It'll hurt us as fans. It'll hurt talking about it too, because you'll all consistently hear national shows talk about it too. And of course, that means I'll have to talk about it too. So this is where we hope that this second half of the season, because we're at game 40 tonight, is that the Florida Panthers just continue to not only try to make the postseason, but just to lower those odds, because it's only going to hurt, and it's going to be a conversation for years. Do you think San Jose Sharks fans are still hurting about that San Jose Sharks fans are still hurting about the Erik Karlsson trade from Ottawa that ended up being Timmy Stützle for the Senators? Sens fans are ecstatic and celebrating that trade. Let's hope that the Panthers aren't in that same position come the draft lottery this offseason. And listen, if they find a way to get a 650 win percentage to 700, the rest of the way they'll be in the postseason. And this conversation that we're having right now is irrelevant by the time we get there. But coming up in segment number 3, we are going to preview tonight's game between the Florida Panthers and the Detroit Red Wings, their second matchup of 3 tonight from Little Caesars Arena. We're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Third and final segment here on this Friday, January 6th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. And if you notice, there's no Nick Fairbanks here on a Friday, but we are going to try to have a special bonus episode because it's a game day on a Friday night. We're going to try to do a post-game podcast with Nick Fairbanks himself, as for him, this game is a little more personal for him, as you know, there is a Detroit Red Wings fan in his life that, you know, this is every time these two teams meet, it's a little personal for him. So it's a little bit of an opportunity to do a Fairbanks Friday night / Saturday episode. So be on the lookout on your podcast feed for that show. But let's discuss just previewing this matchup between the Florida Panthers and the Detroit Red Wings. Of course, a young and up and coming team. And when we say 4-point swings on a game like tonight, really, it really truly is one for the wild card, as these teams are only, as the standings are refreshing on my browser. Last time I checked, these two teams are only separated by 1 point, and Detroit has 3 games in hand. So when we say 4-point swings, 4-point swings on a game like today. And listen, there were many teams that the Florida Panthers were, that we as fans were saying even before the season started, is like, okay, the Florida Panthers are better than this team, they're better than this team, and some of those teams are ahead of the Panthers. Ottawa, Detroit, Buffalo, which Buffalo is just been on a tear on how much that they can score. And the Panthers are behind all those teams that we as fans claimed the Panthers were better than. So you want to prove that you're better than them? Show up on the road and beat them. Yeah, the Panthers right now are 7-12-1 on the road, and the Red Wings are struggling as of right now, 3-5-2. I happened to watch their game on Wednesday night against the New Jersey Devils, where they left Ville Husso out to dry as the New Jersey Devils went into Little Caesar Arena and got a win. Ville Husso has been great, but still, there's a work in progress with that defense for the Detroit Red Wings. And the Panthers, last time around, they really protected Sergei Bobrovsky. They outshot the Detroit Red Wings 41-20. Really protected him, and that was the first game that Alexander Barkov was back from the non-COVID illness. The young guys got on the board. Chris Tierney got on there. Etu Luostarinen, and deflection off Alexander Barkov's shot in his first game back. Mahura jumping into the rush. Kierstead right up from front. And one of the highlights of the year, Matthew Tkachuk going backhand forehand on Nedeljkovic at the time. I'm expecting Husso to be between the pipes. Won't be Nedeljkovic. I believe Nedeljkovic isn't even with the team right now. I believe he is hurt. Let me double check on that. But still, what's important is to continue what you did in the previous matchup, which is forcing the Red Wings outside, taking away the neutral zone, and taking away their zone entries for this game tonight. And it's let me see what the Detroit Red Wings record at home is, and they're above 500 at home, 9-7-3 at home this season, and around the 20s in goals for, goals against. Still better than what they were last season. I believe their goal differential around this time around last year was like in the -60s, -70s. But of course, we crap on the whole Ben Chiarot trade, but that's a free agent signing for the Detroit Red Wings. for them. I mean, if you're acquiring them via free agency versus trading draft capital, it seems that Ben Chiarot is worth it for a team that's still trying to find their way. And right, double checked on Alex Nedeljkovic. He is on a conditioning stint. So Magnus Hellberg will be the backup to Ville Husso tonight for the Detroit Red Wings. And also, still a lot of players missing for Detroit. Tyler Bertuzzi, Philip Zadina, former Panther Mark Pysyk, and Robert Haig, and Matt Luff. So many players still missing for Detroit. Jacob Vrana, who was placed on waivers just the other day, cleared waivers, which with a high cap hit, I think Steve Eiserman's way of thinking was that he wasn't going to get claimed because not only the cap hit of over 4.1 of over 4 million, but the term that's connected with Vrana as well. And it seems a little cold based on him being in the players assistance program recently, but you kind of get the way of thinking with what Eiserman is doing with saying having the confidence that he wasn't going to be claimed. So he's still around with the team, assigned to Grand Rapids after his conditioning stint, so he can stay a little longer and get his mind right. And then when he's ready to play, he's ready to play for Detroit. So yeah, it's not going to be an easy matchup. Like we said, the Detroit Red Wings are above 500 at home, and the Panthers 4-game road trip. One of them against an Eastern Conference team where if there's you got to get at least 6 out of the 8 points. At this point in the season, even 5 out of the 8 points will be a little discouraging because if you look at segments of the season, the 5 out of the 8 points would be under that 650 to 700 points percentage that they would need in order to make the postseason, and that would be under. So at least the 6 out of 8 if you're looking at segments, and especially this one tonight against an Eastern Conference team where you have an ability head to head to make that 4-point swing. But there's also a lot of 4-point swings as well if you're looking at the draft perspective, like we spoke about last segment, to improve the chances, decrease the chances of those odds being that Montreal gets the number 1 overall pick via the Florida Panthers. But none of those teams are on this road trip for the Panthers because Dallas is a contender. Colorado, even though they're missing McKinnon and Landeskog, are a contender. In Vegas has had a bounce back season for the Panthers. The Vegas Golden Knights. So they've had a bounce back on their season after missing the playoffs last season. A very injury riddled team last season. And hey, maybe the Panthers are this year's version of the Golden Knights with all their injuries and cap troubles as well. So who knows? But very important game tonight for the Florida Panthers against the Detroit Red Wings. And we'll be right here, hopefully to recap it on a Fairbanks Friday night. So be on the lookout in the case that we are able to record tonight with Nick Fairbanks here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But in the meantime, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Make sure to subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL and Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, make sure you listen to today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects, your daily podcast covering the next generation of hockey superstars leading up to the NHL entry draft. Locked On NHL Prospects is available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. So Armando Velez signing off. And you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.